What's going on, guys? Austin Zaback here with another episode of the Austin Zaback Show. Today, we have a very special guest by the name of Judge Anthony Bompiani. He's been featured in Forbes, Success Magazine, Men's Journal, OK Magazine, the U.S. Sun, and more for his work, most recently commenting on Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen's divorce. He's a retired judge and family law attorney turned consultant. He's the founder of Judge Anthony Consulting and co-founder of Court Clerk, a family court case management software program for non-attorneys. He's been helping people in the high-conflict divorce and child custody battles for more than 20 years. In addition to working with clients one-on-one and in small groups, he's also created online programs for people around the world who are struggling through divorce and custody battles. Judge Anthony is a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal entrepreneur, and I'm excited to go ahead and jump in to the show. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
In the fire immediately. My first jury trial was a young kid. He was like 21. He was facing 20 to 40 years in prison. First jury trial, right?
Wow.
So I ended up getting a full acquittal on that. Why are you going to pay me 20 grand and instead of paying her 10 to get it wrapped up? And I can remember the guy saying it's because I don't effing hate you guys.
What's going on, guys? Austin Zaback here with another episode of the Austin Zaback Show, and today we have I want to say Judge Anthony, but it's Anthony Bompiani, and I know you by Judge Anthony. I feel like we were just talking before the show, and I had a pleasure of meeting you actually at a dinner, which is really cool. We have some mutual friends, and so, man, I'm just really grateful that we're able to have a conversation today.
I'm glad that you had me here, and I'm glad to, this is going to be a really cool experience. Like we said earlier before we started recording, I just like talking, you getting to know me getting to know you, your viewers getting to know both of us. So I'm excited.
That's awesome, man. Well, you've done a lot of really cool things in your life, and I admire you. I admire anytime I see somebody that just, is pushing and evolving, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I notice about you is every day you're just evolving, you're getting better, and in so many different areas. So it's really cool to watch, and I've listened to a lot of your stuff, and before obviously wanted to prepare a little bit here.
Yeah.
And man, I love that. So for the viewers and the listeners, maybe people that haven't heard kind of your story, I obviously kind of know a little bit about your story, but maybe give us just a little bit of a recap of your story. How you went, and I'd imagine you went to law school and you did the whole thing, right? You became a judge, and now you're doing some consulting work.
Yep. Yeah, so by trade, I'm an attorney. I'm still a licensed attorney. I still maintain my license. I went to law school. First, I went to undergrad in Latrobe at St. Vincent. It's where the Steelers practice.
Okay.
So that's like a big, iconic, place in southwestern Pennsylvania. Really small school, but well known for that.
Yeah.
And then I went to Duquesne University in the city of Pittsburgh for law school. Started practicing law right out of the gate. It was kind of funny because at the time I was married. When I got out of law school, I was married. We had a baby on the way. And the one thing I did not want to do out of law school was family law. That was the one thing I did not want to do. I was more interested in criminal trial work. My undergrad's in psychology. So before I decided to go to law school, I was always interested in maybe being a psychiatrist, psychologist. So that led me into interest in jury psychology and psychology of persuasion and all of that sort of stuff. So I didn't want to do family law. Well, here, I'm a 22, 23-year-old kid at the time, and have a baby on the way, have a house, just got married. My first job offer is with a family law firm, the firm that does the most family law in southwestern Pennsylvania. And I had to do it. We had bills to pay. We had a kid on the way. You're already stressed and nervous at that point in your life. So I ended up taking it, ended up working with a great group of people. I did that for a very long time. I stayed with them for, maybe 6-7 years, something like that. Then I went out on my own. I got a part-time job at the same time with the public defender's office. And the reason why I did that, number one, was because I wanted health insurance for my family at the time, because my family was then growing. At that time, I have 3 boys now. And then also I wanted some very, very intense jury trial work. And whenever you work at the public defender's office, when you're a family law attorney, you're in court a lot, you're working with a lot of emotional people, but you're not doing jury trial work, at least in Pennsylvania. Some states you do, but in Pennsylvania you don't. And I always wanted to do that. So at the public defender's office, they throw your ass like into the fire. Like you are in the fire immediately. My first jury trial was a young kid. He was like 21. He was facing 20 to 40 years in prison. First jury trial, right?
Wow.
So I ended up getting a full acquittal on that first jury trial, and I was like, holy shit, I can do this. Like I always thought I could do this. I can do this. So I ended up doing that, and then getting kind of bigger on the private end of criminal defense. So then my whole practice was probably 75% family law, 25% criminal defense, right? And then in 2015, the minor court judge who was from my hometown, who was there forever, like an icon, he approached me outside of the courthouse one day, and he said, look, I'm going to be retiring. You have a good family name. Like my dad had run for state senate. My dad was on school board for like 15 years or something like that, or 10 years. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, shoot, like this would be pretty cool. It would be, it's not as like you don't take as many risks doing it, and it's not as risky, but it's cushy. It's a good position to have. It will be neat to see things from the other side of the bench. And I got elected in 2000. I think it was 2015, and started in 2016.
Yeah.
And then so I ended up going shortly after that. I ended up going through a separation and divorce, my own separation and divorce. Very, very pivotal moment in my life, like massively. Like I got, I had a lot of like physical issues, sickness. I got, just so many things. Couldn't sleep, lost a ton of weight, had some digestive things going on. And when you're in that position, you start to like reevaluate your life, So you start looking at things like, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to be better? You have pain, you have guilt, you have all sorts of emotions going on. So it's like the perfect time to really dive in deep. Well, one thing that I realized was my divorce, from like a divorce standpoint, was pretty simple and pretty like not really ugly, right? But it was still very painful. Mm-hmm. Like we still said a lot of things back and forth that, looking back, at least I know I didn't really mean. You try to, anybody who's in that position, you try to inflict the amount of pain on the other person that you're feeling, right? So I started thinking in my mind, like, okay, wait a second. Like, I've been a family law attorney forever. I have a background in psychology. I'm a freaking judge. I know, like, I've seen these things from every single angle that you can see them from, and I'm still the worst moment of my life. I'm still having so much problems. So I started thinking, okay, wait a second. Like, as an attorney, like I always obviously tried my best for my clients and cared about my clients. But until I went through it, I never actually realized like how devastating it is, and the reason why people acted the way they did when they were in my office or in the courtroom. So I started thinking, okay, like I'm doing well, like what I'm doing professionally, but there's more. Like I have to have a better way to help people, right? And then a little bit after that, I ended up meeting Candy, my fiance, very good entrepreneur, like one of the best around, very knowledgeable in all areas. And we just started talking, and she said about like maybe you can like try to figure out a way to open it up so you're not just community focused, and you can grow it into something bigger so you can help more people.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started, I went to my first it was a High Performance Academy. It was Brendan Burchard's event, right?
I know Brendan, but yep.
Yeah. So I went, like, I never like had been exposed to any of that stuff before. I was kind of just like small town mentality, like big fish in a small pond. You know what I mean? And I went to one of those events, and I heard these people talking about like different online businesses and, different ways to have different streams of income and different ways to help people. And I was like, holy shit, like I can do this, you know? Because one of my hobbies has always been like tech. Like when I was like back in like 2012, I built an iPhone app. Like I did like I just was always interested in tech. I always built my own websites. I always did everything. So I was like, holy shit, like I can do this. I can build this thing on the side. Like I can start trying to help people. So I put together a free Facebook group. I started inviting people to it. I started going into other Facebook groups that were involving like divorce and custody issues. And I didn't like sell myself to anybody, but I would like go in and answer a question.
Yeah.
You know, I would go in and answer a question. I wouldn't say anything else. Go in and answer a question. Well, then people would check out who I am. They would see my Facebook group. They would join. And then as my group grew, I started going live in there.
Yeah.
And just answering questions. Like, all right, guys, what can I help you with? I'm here. What's up? Questions. I would just start firing off rapid fire.
Just value.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Like that's what built this whole thing, you know? And then from there, I built I was trying to figure out a way to like build a course or a program or something that people could do it on their own time, wouldn't have to pay like my hourly rate, you know, or wouldn't need to, like when you pay an attorney, you're thousands, $10,000, $100,000, like you're going to end up spending.
Right.
So I went in and just started surveying people. Like, okay, what do you guys want to learn? What's most important to you? I've seen all of this stuff from every angle, and not really from like a legal perspective, more like communication, negotiation, how to persuade a court, how to persuade an attorney, how to negotiate with your ex, like how to communicate with your kids about it.
Some different types of value that maybe a lot of other people weren't providing, like, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's a very unique type of value you were given.
Yep, 100%. And what happened was the survey results that came back, the most important things that people wanted to learn were the things that I was best at. And it just clicked. I was like, holy crap, like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
Like I know like, you know, like I said, it was about like persuasion in court, presenting evidence, you know, negotiating with your spouse, negotiating with a lawyer, mindset, you know, psychology, like all of the stuff that I used through my entire career and through my own divorce. So I ended up building my webinar, my first webinar. I ended up doing like the way that I first structured it was I pitched people on like a live group coaching.
Sure.
But what I was doing in the live group coaching was I was building my course. And it was a great way to do it because I knew live and firsthand what questions my audience would have.
Interesting.
You
and
know
then
what
you're
I
just
mean?
recording these videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, and I think like looking back from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like a lot of people try to get involved in that sort of business and build it first and then sell it.
Yep.
When they may be building something that no one freaking wants.
They never asked
or
anybody.
Needs, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So I sold it before I even had it built. And what I did was I promised everybody that I would not end a call until I answered every question that they had, right?
Wow.
So then I went through each of these modules. I think it took a lot of work. It's not like I wasn't like rolling in money. You know?
Yeah,
like,
for sure. Yeah.
Like I was vastly underpaid to do it, but I still...
You had the vision.
I still got paid to do it, and I had the vision. And then from then on, I built it, and I've just continued to iterate and evolve and grow and like listen. Like the most important thing is just listening to what people want.
Wow.
And give it to them.
I love that so much.
You know? And
So many people don't do that, bro.
Yeah.
You know, so many people, you're 100% right. I never thought of it that way. They build the product. I've done that, right? Personally, I mean, I really have. You know, I built the product that I think people want.
Yep.
And then I sell it to them, right? Yep. And then you have I almost end up doing it in reverse, right? Then people are like, but you're missing that.
Yes.
Or you're missing this. I'm like, oh God. Like, to me, that was common sense. Let me add that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And because I thought that they already knew that, right? And they didn't already know that.
Exactly.
Man, I like that.
And then you're also like, not only that, but you're also learning their terminology for your copy, for your course, for your ads, for your webinar, for your content, everything. You're learning what resonates with them.
Yeah.
Right? And call that whatever you want. Like call that a sales tactic, call it whatever you want. I call it the best, like offering value.
Yeah.
Like you're figuring out how to give the people that want something from you. You're figuring out how to give it to them exactly how they want it.
Yeah. That's badass, dude.
Yeah.
I love that. I want it. So there's so many things I want to peel back here.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, you said you had no interest in family law.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm curious as to like initially your initial mindset there. Like, why was that?
Yeah. because everything that I learned in law school and everything to that point, which I didn't really have much experience with, but everything I had to that point about divorces, I knew how brutal it was. And I was thinking, at that time in my life, I was like, 20, 22, 23 years old, immature, driven by pleasure, driven by, short-term gain. And I thought in my mind, like, I don't want to be carrying this stuff around. I don't want to be going in and, arguing back and forth like about a lot of nonsense, because a lot of times it is nonsense,
right,
with other attorneys. I knew through law school that divorce and family law is actually one of the simplest areas of law.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
And why is that, you think? Is it because it's just people are arguing over nothing? I mean,
yeah.
I shouldn't say it like that, but a lot of times people are arguing over maybe things that in the grand scheme of things aren't that big of a deal.
Yeah, well, from a divorce perspective, it's really like numbers. Like it's really calculating the support, calculating the marital estate, seeing who gets what. Like it's not some like massively complex legal argument. It's arguing numbers, you know
Right.
what I mean? Whereas if you're like getting into like products litigation or construction litigation or criminal defense or stuff like that, where you're arguing little intricacies of the law.
Right.
Like in law school, especially from a child custody standpoint, like I can remember like bar preparation and taking like finals in family law courses. The big joke was like, well, for every answer, we're going to put best interest of the child. Like best interest of the child. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is that it's an easier area content-wise. So for that reason, so many people do it.
Interesting.
So it's not very, at least, in my opinion, it's not very conducive to the client's needs, because you have like a shit ton of attorneys who are doing this thing, so they don't know who's good, who's bad, who's,
right.
Because you'll see a lot of lawyers who will have like their own little practice, but then they'll do family law too, right? Because it like
it's
pays
like the
the
add-on.
bills.
It's
not
like,
going.
Why wouldn't I do that?
It's not
right.
going anywhere. I mean, we have more than half of our, at least in the United States, of our society getting divorced.
Yeah.
And that's not stopping. That might increase.
Sure.
Yeah. Just with all the stress and everything everybody's going through, especially lately. So yeah, that was my thinking. It was more from the emotional burden and mental burden, and not wanting to like have to be involved in those sort of things. That was the main reason why, right?
And then did it change when you obviously like then you evolved, right? And then all of a sudden the next thing you know, you get this job offer, where you're now doing the very thing, right, that you said you didn't really want to do. And then you end up, okay, now you're like 25% family law, 75% criminal defense.
Reverse,
reverse.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha. Now, did you develop more of at that point, once you got into the thick of it, did you end up, I shouldn't say enjoying it, but did you end up coming to like that side of the law? Okay.
Yeah, so here's what happened. Like, I still had a part of me that really hated it, but here's what happened. So I got hired by this firm as a young associate. Like, initially, my duties were basically like calculating marital estates, the values, like combining it with the law to argue the best position for our client. Like, that was my job, to basically sit in my office, put together these like spreadsheets that we called them, of the marital estate, the assets, the liabilities, the facts. It was so dry for me, so boring, not something I wanted to do. Like when I was an undergrad and in law school as well, I did like a lot of like mock trial and moot court. So I always like had an interest for the courtroom. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sitting
action,
there.
right?
Yeah.
When you're in the courtroom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm in there and I'm like, man, see, this is why I didn't want to do this. This stuff sucks, right? Well, I can't remember. I mean, it was so long ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. But at one point then, my managing partner, good guy, he hit me up and he was like, okay, look, I need you to cover me in court. And I was like, okay,
I'm in.
Let's rock and roll, right? So it was like a simple. I want to say, like, again, it was so long ago, but I want to say it was like an emergency motion for for a custody situation where I want to say it was like a holiday. It wasn't like Christmas, but it might have been like a trip for the 4th of July that was supposed to happen for custody.
Yep.
And they needed me to go in and like argue for our client at the time.
Got it.
And when I got up there to the court, like I had everything prepped and you know, and when I went up there for the court and I met the client face to face and I saw the pain and agony in her eyes, and I knew that like I was the only thing that stood between the judge and a result and trying to help this woman, you know, get what she wants, that what she believes is in the best interest of her children. And then it started to like turn.
Wow.
Then I was like, all right,
powerful.
shit, like I'm important. Like this is important work. You know, this is important. But even then, I still didn't realize until I went through it myself.
Right,
you know?
of course.
Yeah.
And how many would you say at that point? So now you get into it. You deal with this first case. By the way, did you win that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. So you won that one for the client, and and that had to have been extremely like I mean, you just had to in that moment be like, wow, right?
Yeah, because like, I mean, if you think about it, young associate, like your one chance, you know, it's like you don't, you know. You got that one shot, like Eminem says, right? You know? And it's like if you don't come through, you were the young associate. It was your fault. You didn't do the right thing. You didn't say the right thing.
Yeah, and you might not have another shot after that, right? Like this guy, he gives you a shot. He's doing whatever he's doing. He can't make it, right? Here you are. I love that. So you end up winning that thing. It feels great. You're like, okay, you see this emotion of like, wow. I think at that moment it becomes real, right? For you, obviously, right? Like you're there physically with the person, like you said. So how many more of those did you do? And like before then you went through it yourself, would you say?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, if you had to.
Yeah, I mean, I started in 2002 or something like that. So it's been like a little over 20 years.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get separated until 17.
Wow. So you did a lot.
So I mean, it was a long time.
Yeah.
And you know, and like I said, I always tried my best. I always felt bad for my clients. You know, if they were like being really unreasonable or something, maybe part of me was like, and like the one thing too that I always prided myself on was I was always upfront with my client. Like if I thought they were being an idiot or stubborn or stupid, I would tell them. Yeah. Right. Another thing I would also always tell them was that I was the only one that was going to win in the case. You know what I mean? I'm the and I still tell people that in my content today is like there are only two winners in a custody case: the husband's lawyer and the wife's lawyer. Right. Right. Yep. Because regardless of what happens, I'm walking away with my money. Right. Right. I might leave you and you know, even if you win, you're getting half. Right. You're getting half of what you work for. Right. At the
end of the day, I mean, it's just the reality of it, right?
Yeah. And then you throw the kids in, it's even worse. Like I tell people in my course, in my programs, and in my content, like you already lost. Like even if you and I can say this from experience, like personal experience, like even if you have 98% custody, like there's still 2 nights out of every 100 that you don't get to kiss your kids goodnight and tuck them in, right? So you already lost, but your attorney, is going to win regardless.
And he's on to the next, right? And he's going to go, Yeah. Agreed. Wow. I love that. In terms of I'm just curious, you know, like what are some of the craziest things that, like you say you were pretty upfront with your clients over the years, right? You know, what are maybe just some examples of like things that people were just like very unrealistic about? Like I can imagine you have a few off the top of your head you can remember.
Yeah. The biggest thing, like one in particular I can remember was the entire divorce was stalled on a spice rack.
Oh my God.
Like shit like that, where I would be now, like you're not allowed to do this ethically, but I would be to the point where I would be like, I'm just gonna buy you a freaking spice rack. Right. You know what I mean? Like, or I'm gonna cut my bill by $100 or like whatever. Yeah. But like spice rack, a lot of another
just who's gonna get it? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Spice rack. I had we represented. It wasn't my client. It was one of the partners' clients when I first started. But we represented like a mortician, like a funeral home owner, you know. And I can remember in particular, like it would have taken like $10,000 extra to pay to this other side to avoid like a full blown like trial. And the full blown trial would have, you know, ended up being like probably 20 grand, right?
Yeah.
So you basically you pay half
Yep.
to settle it.
Yep.
And I can remember sitting in meetings and being like, why are you gonna pay me 20 grand and instead of paying her 10
Right.
to get it wrapped up? And I can remember the guy saying it's because I don't effing hate you guys.
Wow.
And I'm like,
yeah,
you just want to shake them, like
Right.
shake the sense into them. But again, until you go through it and until you start thinking irrationally in the moment, because that's what we do when we're in those moments. We don't think with logic, we think with emotion. And that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't really, I didn't grasp that. I still think it's wrong to think that way, but I wasn't as empathetic as I am now.
Sure.
And understanding what people go through.
As a lawyer, obviously you're not a therapist or a psychiatrist or anything like that over the years, so you may or may not be able to answer this with complete confidence. But as a lawyer and a judge, what were some of the most common reasons? If I don't even know if that's even ever anything you got into much, but when you see all these people that are getting a divorce and arguing and battling, what were some of the most common reasons for that? Was it infidelity or money
for divorce?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I know you weren't the
money. Like a few of the reasons that I would see would be money, right? Adultery would be one. One big one that like people don't understand is like transitions in life, right? We change who we are as our lives go on, right? And if you're not either old enough to understand that or mature enough to understand that, it can have a real impact on like the relationship between you and your partner, right? So like maybe you're changing in one way and your wife is changing in a different way, and like you're not either emotionally aware enough to understand that, or you're just too young or whatever. But that's another big one. And then what usually happens is stuff like that usually leads to the infidelity or leads to the symptom, right? Another thing too that things change big time whenever you have kids.
Sure.
So you have kids and people change. People are different hormonally, biologically, emotionally. Their complete like realm of needs change. Like you change as a human being, and until you're in a place where you can like understand that and then not only respect it but appreciate it and encourage it. Like there's always going to be tension, right? Now, some people are strong enough to just say, F it, I'm committed.
Yeah.
Like I'm staying, whether it be my church or my morals or my values or my beliefs or whatever it is, like I'm committed, right? But sometimes what happens is, and this is like after going through my own, this is why I'm not as strict with that stuff, is because sometimes like what happens is people do that, but then they just stay in a relationship to stay in a relationship. Because they're committed. Yeah. Like they're committed, but they're not committed to actually like supporting that person and like encouraging that person and like trying to be the best they can be for that person,
And in your opinion, do you think that's wrong? I mean, like let's just say hypothetically there wasn't any abuse in the relationship. There wasn't any inherent
abuse is another one.
Right. Yeah, and we'll get into that,
one,
right?
Yeah.
But let's just say it was the relationship, aside from the fact that you have two people that are really just in it because they're just committed. Yeah. There's nothing really else or substance to the relationship, right? But there's no inherent risk either in the relationship, either mentally or physically. In your opinion, and again, I know you're a lawyer and but should they get out or should they stay?
Honestly, I think that's case by case. Yeah. I think it's people. Like, I think the biggest thing that people need to understand is whatever decision you make, go with it. Like, don't have guilt about it. Don't worry about what anybody else is going to say about it. Like, don't worry about what your family or community is going to say about it. Like, we're here one time. Yeah. So if serving yourself and your family and your God or whoever is done best by staying in that, then do it.
Right.
If it's done best by getting out, then do it. Yeah. Like you gotta one thing that like people need to understand too is when they go through this stuff, like at least like this was from my personal perspective, what happened with me is like instead of going through this and having like poor me and guilt and F her or F him attitude, like you got to start being introspective and start being the best you can be, because like me, like I'm a lot like, you know, I went through a shitty divorce, but I'm like someone now who like I'm proud to be an example for my kids. Like it's really weird to say, because some people would be like, oh, he went through a divorce. Like that's not a good example. But I'm a better man now. Like I'm more like I'm just a totally different person than I was.
You had to be. You had to become that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's one of the things that I try to help people realize and do, is to take that worst moment in their life and use it as like a springboard into the best years of their life. Because if they keep looking back on like what went wrong, what I do wrong, or what she do wrong, or what he do wrong, or like how big of a jerk they are, or how their family hates me or I hate them. And if they instead look forward, like, okay, this is effed up, or however you want to look at it, but now how do I be the best me that I can take care of my kids the best? Or if you're not with them all the time, be the best example.
Yep. Because
even when you're not with them, that energy's there, that synergy's there, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like when I got divorced, I had a picture in my court office of my 3 kids. And cause it was tough, man. Like it was brutal. It's like, you don't know what they think or they feel or what they think about you, or if like you, like they like, and I'm speaking for everybody, not just me, but like, you don't know if they know you love them or if they love you, or like, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
What's being told to them?
Yeah.
What are they like?
The voices. Like who's giving them their advice? Like who are they talking to?
Exactly.
Yeah. You have no idea.
Yeah. So like what I started to realize, and what I coach people on now, is like the only thing you can control is yourself.
Wow.
So I had this picture that I put in my office. It was my 3 kids, and I put a sticky note on it, and I just wrote on there, "We're watching." Yeah. Like we're watching, even when they're not with me, like they're watching. So okay, like I messed up. I lost a marriage, right?
Sure.
It's major loss. But now what am I going to do?
Of course. Yeah, at a certain point, right? You have to. It's like, okay, what happened, right?
Yep.
And so do you see then a lot of people, obviously you must see a lot of people who, you said a little while ago, you know, these relationships where the divorce is now a thing, right? It's okay, it's happening, right? Mm-hmm. And then people are now living in the past for way too long. They're beating themselves up. They're overthinking everything. I'd imagine you see quite a bit of that.
Oh my God. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what it does is it completely brings them out of character. Like they turn into somebody that they're not.
Right.
And then it just like life's a snowball, man. Like you're either going to snowball up the hill or snowball down the hill. Yeah. You know, and when you start like worrying so much about what others are thinking, or what your ex did or said, or what they're going to do, or, you know, how they're going to try to hurt you, like you're not making any progress for yourself and for your own life. And in turn, you're not serving. Like you can claim all you want. You love your kids. Yeah. But if you're not taking care of number one first, like, you're not doing the best you can. Yep. You know what I'm saying?
I do. So what is your advice to people? I know that I watch a lot of stuff with you, and I know you've dealt a lot with narcissists. Yeah. And narcissists that you know, where they're in a relationship, and you know. First of all, I guess I have a question before the question, which is, do you believe there's levels to narcissism, right? Mm-hmm. Narcissism. And is there a line where all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we're over the line, right? Like, and then how does somebody deal in the relationship if they're in that relationship? Yeah. Like, what do they do?
Well, to the first part, there are definitely levels. Okay. And let's be honest, like we all have a little bit of narcissism in us. Mm-hmm. Like that's just human beings, ego. That's our ego. Yep. You know, we're driven by that.
I was actually going to ask you. Yeah, like I'm glad you said that. Not to interrupt you, but you know, I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I deal with business owners. I deal with people who are playing the game of life at a pretty high level, right? Yep. And I almost want to say, unfortunately, that I see the narcissism a little more. And I'm not saying that they're like level 10, right? If they're, you know, but a little more than I see it in just a normal, everyday kind of just, you know, somebody who's just kind of, you know, playing the
Yep.
game, maybe not quite at that level. Would
Yep.
you agree with that?
Absolutely,
Okay.
100%. And not only are there levels for different people, but there are levels for different areas of life and different events that those people are in. So like you or me, we might be guided more by our ego at a certain moment in our life, or, you know, in a certain event, or when we need it the most, or when it's like trying to protect us from something, right? But when you're dealing with something like a divorce, sure, there are different levels, and we all have those qualities at some point, whether we don't verbalize them or we temper them a little bit, but then in different moments too. But what separates, like, and when I say narcissist, like, it's not a diagnosis or anything like that, but what separates the people that are truly like narcissistic are the people that have zero empathy at all. Like the regular human being, like, my ego might take over in certain areas of my life.
Sure.
I might be narcissistic in certain areas of my life. Same with you.
Yep.
But there's still that element of empathy.
Right. All of a sudden you feel bad.
Right.
Or you feel that like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I
Right.
screwed up. Like, I need to apologize to somebody, right?
Right.
Okay.
And that's the thing. And what happens is when you're dealing with somebody truly that's narcissistic, not only do they not have that empathy, but they like capitalize on that lack of empathy to their benefit. So, and I always teach people, like, you don't really need to know if they're a narcissist, like, so you know how to handle them with evidence and in the courtroom. You more importantly need to know that so that you know how to communicate with them or not communicate with them, so that you know how to set the appropriate boundaries with them, right? So you know how to negotiate or not negotiate with them, right? That's more important in that regard, and so you know to stay the hell away from them.
Of course, yeah. And how does one tell? I mean, like, are there signs? Like, let's say I'm in a relationship, and by the way, I mean, this could be any relationship, right? I mean, personally, I've actually been in business relationships. I've had partners in my life who have some of the qualities that we're talking about, right? And so, and then you also have the monogamous, the intimate relationship, right? The romantic relationship. So it could be a friendship. I mean, it could really ultimately be any type of relationship,
100%.
right? So if you're in a relationship with somebody who's actually, they've exceeded the limit of, like, okay, they don't have the empathy. They're actually, this is a toxic thing, right? How do you know that, though? Like, if you're in that, sometimes I feel like we're blind, right? And I feel like people, they like, you want to see the best in people, right? And you think, you know, and so you end up staying in this thing for too long. Like, what are some signs maybe that people can kind of look out for? And it's like, whoa, hold on, like, this is a big red flag.
It's the lack of empathy, right? It's the lying about, like, a lot of times what will happen in a divorce situation when you're in with someone like that is there'll be, like, what's called a smear campaign.
Okay.
When they'll, like, lie about you, try to smear your character and your name and everything else, so you know you're dealing with someone that, like, really doesn't give a shit. But more importantly, like, I think people need to adapt with that sliding scale. And I think, you know, in a situation of an intimate relationship, what are you going to deal with? What are you going to tolerate? Right? It's again, it's case by case. If you can tolerate some of that stuff or redirect it or whatever, then fine. Same with a broken relationship and co-parenting. If you can tolerate, if it's not bad enough that, like, if it's, like, minimal enough that you can tolerate some of it or redirect it or just ignore it or whatever, then great. But again, you slide up the scale, and if it's someone that's completely antagonistic, harassing, like, nonstop, all of the time, well, then, like, you got to cut it off.
Sure.
You got to protect a number one. So it's not really any, like, it's a case by case and also a sliding scale. There's really nothing to pinpoint and say, like, that's it. But it's almost like, how does it impact you and your ability to, like, be who you need to be, you know, while you're here? And how does it impact your relationship with them, whatever it may be, whether it's business, co-parenting,
Sure,
partnership. A lot of times, like, in the business world, it's a lot easier because there are no really other feelings. Like, unless there's like a friendly, like platonic type relationship in addition, well then, yeah, it's like, well, how the hell could he or she screw me over? How could they do that to me? Right.
Right.
But other than that, it's kind of like dog eat dog,
It
you
is.
know?
Very much
So,
so.
right. But then when you look at an intimate relationship or even friendship, it's like, how the hell could you do that? Like,
Way more emotion.
right.
Way more like, baggage. I mean, there's way more to the equation.
Yep.
Than just like a math formula almost.
Yeah.
Right? Like what we were talking about a while ago. You know, the moment you start getting into the thick of it, you're like, whoa, this is no longer just you take 50, I take 50. This is like our emotions we're heavily emotional, right? At that point. Yeah. Do you see narcissism and abuse like go hand in hand at all? I mean, what are your thoughts kind of there? I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
Verbal abuse, mental, physical, the whole thing.
Yeah. I don't know if they're like, if it's causation or if it's causally related, if that's the word.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a correlation, you know. Usually if you have someone who's ultra narcissistic, usually there's at least verbal abuse or emotional abuse, you know, physical abuse a lot of times too. But also it could be someone who has some other sort of mental disorder, right? Or it could be someone who had that type of home environment when they were younger and learned, you know, from that sort of example or whatever. Or it could be alcoholism or drugs or whatever. So they're not causally related or whatever that damn word is. But there is definitely a correlation.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think I heard you talking one time where you're talking about people's upbringing, right? And you were saying adversity is a good thing typically for a child, right, to deal with.
Yeah.
I personally dealt with a lot of adversity growing up. Never any abuse that I can remember, but a lot of adversity. I grew up with my grandparents most of the time, et cetera, right? Yep. And I'll talk to people in my life about it sometimes, and we'll have these conversations of like, okay, like what's the formula? And I don't have any kids, right? But like, I'm thinking about the future all the time, right? Like, what's the right formula to raise a child, right? And like, I look at my friends, you know, and I have buddies growing up where, okay, they had a really good upbringing. Like the family everything was great, right?
Yep.
And they turned out horrible, right?
Yeah.
And then you take other people where they didn't have a great upbringing and they turned out pretty dang good.
Yep.
Right? So like, you know, I remember you specifically said, okay, abuse is not okay ever, right? Yep. But adversity can be. So like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, from it's what you're saying is so true. Like, and from a divorce and custody perspective, like in that regard, what I try to ingrain in people is like a lot of times they'll be like, you know, oh, you know, dad does this, or dad can't do this, or mom does this, or mom can't do this. Like poor Johnny or poor Tommy or Susie, you know. Or poor them that there's a split family now, and now they have to go back and forth, and you know, whatever. And sure, that does suck. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that like people should get divorced to instill adversity in their kids. You know?
Yeah.
But the people that are going through it need to look at it from a different perspective and think of, like, instead of having the poor me attitude for their child, think of how to like enrich them and strengthen them for it, right?
Yeah.
And to twist it themselves. Now, granted, if you're in a high conflict, highly toxic divorce, that's going to be so much worse for a child than parents who like get along and actually try, right? So instead of, if you're in one of those situations, instead of like, and again, I'm not saying like people should get divorced or be assholes to each other to try to like give their kids some challenges, but life is full of challenges.
It is.
If you don't know how to overcome adversity, like you're not gonna be very happy. It's really weird. It's really weird to say that.
Yeah.
Because you would think no adversity would make you happy.
Not true at all.
No, like
Mark Manson talks about that a lot. If you've ever read any of his stuff.
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like our whole point in life is to like, at least in my opinion, is like to overcome and grow.
Yeah.
Like, and surely it's like being, it's like being at the gym. Like you're tearing down your body when you're growing it.
You walk out of the gym and you feel the best.
Yeah.
You feel better as soon as you walk out of the gym than you would have ever felt
Yeah.
had you not done what you just did to your body.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it's not like in that situation, it's not like you want to be necessarily like, well, piss on you, Susie, like get over it.
Yep.
No, you don't want to do that, but start to like teach them redirects. You know, start to teach them the good, like for example, like one of like my middle son was just really sick. He got a real bad flu. He lost the poor kid lost like 15 pounds, you know. He's 15 years old. He's not like he's taller for a 15-year-old. But anyway, like it's like that, okay? You relate that to the adversity of a divorce. Like I could have been like, "Oh my God, poor you." Like, "Oh, like let me, you know," which granted, you do like I do like you do comfort them and love them. You know, or you could have been like, "Screw you, get over it," which I didn't do. But what I did, and again, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. This is all our first go at it, right? But my thing is, which I think the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it relates to a divorce, is, you know, like I'm so proud of you how you're going through this. Like I'm so proud of you how you're working through this sickness.
Wow.
Like, man, you're like, you know, I would tell him like, because he had like digestive issues too. I'm like, man, you're like. The way you like cleaned up your diet, like that's awesome, dude.
Wow.
Like that's incredible. And then I would like show him like things that weren't necessarily related about like you know, how challenges like help you grow.
Wow.
And make you better.
Yep.
And then I would like talk about like things that I went through.
Yep.
You know, like it was very similar in that regard because last year I had a shoulder chest injury.
Sure.
So and I really like to work out. And like I lost all my strength and it sucked. And I was explaining to him like, yeah, it sucked, but guess what? Now I'm 100% back. And all it took was patience, work, and like consistency. Yep. I'm like, you're not going to snap your fingers overnight and be healthy.
Sure.
Like, and it's the same with going through a divorce situation. You're not going to snap your fingers and like forget about it and everything's happy and fun. But here's the tools that you need.
Yeah.
And then also how am I like a lot of times when people are in that situation in a divorce, they're gonna not only look at you and listen to you, but they're gonna pick up on your energy, right? So how am I dealing with it, right? Am I dropping them off in an exchange and being like, oh, you know, Daddy's gonna miss you, like I'm so sorry, like this sucks so bad. Granted, I feel that way.
Sure.
Or am I gonna be like, you know, hey guys, enjoy your time. Like I'll be looking forward to seeing you next week. Yep. Like, you know what I mean? So it's all, and the problem is
they're learning from you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the adversity situation. That's how I kind of feel about it. You got to remember, it's not a bad thing, but that doesn't mean you can't just ignore it. You got to like try to do your best to teach them, show them example, encourage them, praise them for like being strong and doing, you know, taking steps to, you know, to grow.
Yeah. In certain ways, I believe we're not going to go out and look for particular adversity, right? Obviously, if you were to consider the gym adversity or like reading a self-help book or going to a Tony Robbins event, then sure, right? But in particular areas, we're not out looking for divorce or looking for childhood issues or looking for that.
Right.
But when they happen, what I'm hearing you say is a lot of it it comes down to your mindset and how you view it, and is the glass half full or half empty, and what's your perspective, and what outcome are you choosing? Like you're in control, right? And it goes back to what you were saying a little while ago. Like you can control you. You can't necessarily control the adversity, and you can't control if there's other people involved. Right?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's you know, it's one of the like Marcus Aurelius, the quote, like one of the quotes I love the most is he basically says something, and I don't know it verbatim, but I think about it all the time, and it's, you know, you have control over your mind, not outside events.
Sure.
You know, and if you don't understand that and don't learn that and follow that, like you're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
You know, so like, and that's someone like that dude wrote that like over 1,000 years ago.
Pretty crazy.
You know.
Yeah.
So the point of it is like human beings have been human beings forever. You know, like we're all the same, other than maybe like, you know, different genetic changes. Like we all have that same soul and that same, you know, mind and everything. So, you know, that it's it's how you look at at what you're going through.
I love that.
Right?
I think it's so valuable, so true. I read recently somewhere, I heard recently that the Tom Brady thing and everything going on there.
Yeah.
A publication or somebody had reached out to you. I'm probably not describing it right.
Yeah.
And they asked you for your opinion.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was like, that's another interesting thing is like, you know, I just started this whole thing like just to try to like get some value out there and help people. And now it's like, I was just thinking about this the other day, like the U.S. Sun contacts me to ask me about the Tom Brady and Giselle divorce. And it's like, oh, this is great. Like, holy shit. Like this,
right.
What do I, like, I'm some dude from some little town, you know,
Yeah.
like just
to put yourself out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they contacted me and they said, hey, we you know, we'd like to interview you for we're doing a piece on the Brady and Giselle divorce, and we'd like your take on it. So they asked me all these questions. I like answered, like they asked me, you know, just about like what they have to lose and how they should play the negotiations. And
if you had to summarize just kind of a couple of your answers, like what would they, like the high level cliff notes?
Yeah, my big thing for people like for everybody really, but especially people like that, is they got to remember what they have to lose going through this. And for people like that, one of the most important things is their public image, right? Because that, like, their name and their likeness is worth more than any asset that they have, because it's going to generate more assets in the future, right? So one of the things that I did in my interview was I recommended that both of them stay like they are. They both seem like, you know, other than the fact that he kicked my Steelers ass every year, they both seem like, you know, upstanding individuals. You never really hear any like major dirt about either of them, right? So one of two things is true, and actually they're both probably true, is they've done a good job at like playing this game of life, but they also have done a good job of like keeping their skeletons like private and keeping things in between the two of them. And when you go through a divorce, a lot of that can blow up. Because like if say those two are in a divorce and there are a lot of private things that people don't know, and one side gets pissed off at the other side and goes nuts and then just starts leaking all of it, well then you're like you're basically bringing down the entire ship, right? And one of my things that I talked about was like, I referenced like the Kim and Kanye divorce, right? And how a lot of that stuff went public, you know, and I think most of it was Kanye, but that can be very detrimental, especially for people whose name and likeness can bring in like millions and millions and millions of dollars. So that was my recommendation, and it was interesting. And I also recommended like trying to get it wrapped up as quickly as possible, because then like the way the news cycle goes, like there'll be yesterday's news, right? Yep. So I did this interview, and then like this was like right when they filed. I did the interview. They announced they finalized the divorce the next day. So the U.S. Sun was like, holy shit, he was right. Like, you know, so then the article that went in was that basically like, you know, something like former judge says they were wise to, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then it just broke down the whole entire thing. And then it was really cool, because then like the OK magazine picked up on it. A couple other different outlets picked up on it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was cool.
It's really cool to see how, you know, like you said, you're just a guy that got good at a particular thing, right? Helping people ultimately, right? Like that's what I believe every industry, capitalism, right, is really based on fundamentally serving and helping people, right? If you do it properly. And then you got good, you share it with the world, and here you are, man. It's really cool to see the evolution, right?
Yeah,
of what you're going through. And so I have a question. You know, obviously you said a little while ago, like 50%, I think, is 50% of people in America right now
it's something like 50, 51, 52, something like that, yeah.
Do you believe, and I get this is probably just going to be an opinion, but do you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it gets worse as you go, right? Statistically?
What do you mean?
Second marriage is like 60, 70% divorce.
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. That's a good question.
I think if you Google it, okay, I think if it like first marriage is like 50% divorce, or give or take. And then second, like 60 or 70%, and then third, I want to say it's up like 80%.
Yeah, well, that would make sense psychologically, because it's once you're in that second marriage, you already forget about the pain you went through in your first one, and you were almost rewarded after, you know what I'm saying? So psychologically, I never looked into that stat, but that would make sense because you get through your first one, now you're happy again.
Yep.
And then it's like, all right, well, now I'm in shit again. Well, how am I going to get happy again? Well, I'm going to get divorced and go get another marriage.
That's an interesting way to look
You
at
know
it.
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
I know exactly. Yeah, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Knowing now that you didn't know that, like, do you think that it's true? Like, do you think that, like, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think I could see why that is true.
Okay.
You know, and I did, like, one of the, you know, it's funny because when you're a divorce attorney, the first thing you always hear is, I'm never doing this again, you know, from a client. And I did some of my content's really silly on TikTok and Instagram, but I did one where it was like basically like the client comes into my office and they're like, you know, I'm never getting married again. And then all of a sudden, like, Tinder shows up and like, what's up? You know, like,
I love that. Yeah.
So I could see, because obviously, like, you just got absolutely destroyed from a romantic perspective, you know, and sexual perspective, like emotional, like everything, you know. And then it's like, okay, now you get the courage back to, like, get back on the horse or whatever metaphor you want to use. And then you start feeling good again, right? But the problem is, and this is why I always, like, go back to with my clients and my students and everything to work on themselves, is because if you don't fix those triggers and, like, those issues that you may or may not have created in your relationship, or those insecurities or anything like that, I don't give a shit if you, like, just met, like, you know, an angel. Like, it's gonna come up again. You know, I know, like I'm real big, and it's just been recent. Like, it's just been like, it's like it took me 40 years to grow up. You know what I mean? But I'm real big on, like, iteration. So even in, like, my relationship now with Candy, like, she's, like, the greatest thing in the world. Like, she makes me a better human being, but I still have to check myself. I still have to, like, you know, old habits, old triggers, you know, just old patterns.
Sure.
And you got to check yourself, and you got to continue to grow, because otherwise, you know, my ass and everyone else's ass that's in that same boat is going to end up in the same boat.
That's true. That's very true. What are your thoughts on prenups, out of curiosity?
You know, when it's like it took me 40 years to grow up. Like, when I was younger, I was always like, that's bullshit. Like, they should be able to, like, do what they want to do, and, you know, or be together. If they're going to be together, they should be together, right? Not do what they want to do. That's the opposite argument. If they're going to be together, they should be together, and yours is hers, and his is hers, and and then the older I get, I'm more of, like, my approach now to that, and really to life in general, is, like, whatever works. You know what I mean? Whatever works. Like, if that's what's gonna, like, you know, make you secure or happy, it's probably going to avoid a lot of legal costs in the end, you know, if you do it right. So if that's what works for people, then do it.
You know, a lot of people say, like, oh, you know, prenup, you're going into the relationship with the wrong mentality, right? That's the number one thing you really hear of the argument of why you shouldn't. I mean, it's what in the business world, right? You know, I had a car one time where I actually had my license tag said prenup, and it wasn't inherently that I was pro or against prenups. It was just that I thought at the time that was a funny license tag to have on that particular car. I got a lot of comments on it. You know? But, you know, that's the argument you hear, right? Is, okay, you know, if we do one, we're thinking about the end in the beginning.
Yeah.
We're you know, and so, like, that's what I've heard.
Yep.
And I could see that a little bit. I mean, what is your take on that?
Well, yeah, I like, whenever I'm giving you the counter argument here, it's not that I disagree with you, because that's 100% a take that people have, and it's completely valid. Yep. But then the other aspect is, you know, number one, if anything ever happens, we're saving ourselves a lot of money in the future on attorney's fees, right? And then number two, and maybe, like, the most important thing, and again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but, like, it allows you to focus on, like, what really matters in the relationship. Like, the assets, the money, you know, we can't take that with us, right? Like, that's awesome, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm all for it, but, like, if you, and again, I'm like a whatever they decide type on this issue. But if you're looking for the counter argument, it's like, all right, well, we just put aside this issue of money, which technically should probably be, you know, the last issue as far as how we love each other.
Yeah.
Right. So now we can focus on this, you know, it's almost like if I kind of relate it to, and this is a weird relation, but I kind of relate it to co-parenting. And I've thought about this with my ex, and I think about it with other people, not necessarily in massively high conflict divorces, but in divorces in general. Like, everything else has been put to rest. Like, the romantic relationship, the, like, worrying about where someone's going and what they're doing at night and who they're talking to and whatever, the jealousies, like, everything is now gone. And all you have to focus on is your kids. That's it. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like, all of those money issues are gone. Let's focus on each other and growing individually and together.
I like that.
And again, it's not that I'm necessarily like, I think it's case by case. I think it's what works for people.
I like that answer of really, in a lot of these areas, unless, again, you're talking like high conflict, divorce, stuff like that, like a lot of the relationship, you know, when you're giving advice to people, a lot of it really is like, there is no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Right. It really truly is case by case. Right.
Yeah.
And you really got to look at the details of everything and then make decisions. Right.
Yep.
So, how has it been now? You're in a relationship with a high level entrepreneur. Right. She was just on the Ed Milet show. I mean, I was lucky enough to have her on the podcast. She's awesome. Right. Very successful. How has that been, being in that relationship now? Is it different at all?
My God, it's my life is like, and it's not just because of all of that, but my life is completely different than it was, you know, 5 years ago, 5 years ago. But yeah, it is very, very different, and it's amazing. Like, it's amazing. But what I will tell anybody who's in a similar relationship, whether male or female, you know, when you're in a relationship with someone who is like massively independent like that, growing at like crazy rates, there are two major things that I would recommend. Number one, you can't be jealous at all. You have to buy in and support every ounce of it. That's number one. If you have any sort of resentment, you know, I think it was Gandhi said that resentment is basically like drinking poison and hoping that your enemy dies, right? So you have to 1,000,000%, no resentment, no jealousy. It's for the team, right? Do everything you can to grow it because it's for the team. I've been doing everything I can to support her. And then the second part about it is, which this is the part that people forget about, and this is what can really lead to destruction in those sorts of relationships, is the other side has to be growing too. For me, I knew I gotta grow too.
Yeah.
I have to. And it's not like a competition at all. It's just that, like, if I in our personal situation, and everybody can kind of relate to this, if one person's doing all of the growing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like economically or popularity or anything like that, but in any area, if one person's doing all of the growing, it's going to be a lopsided relationship.
Interesting.
Now, that's not to say that I got to go out and like grow in a way that like I need to get on the Ed Milet show, or I need to write a book, or I need to do this, but I need to grow in a way that I'm going to be personally fulfilled. You know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
So like I can't, and the precursor to that is to eliminating that resentment and jealousy and adding in that support. Because then when you do that, like she raised my level, not even intentionally, just by me having that theory and being like, all right, she's about ready to take off on a rocket ship.
Yeah.
If I sit here and twiddle my thumbs, I'm going to be unhappy with who I am, and jealousy is going to creep in, and resentment and all of that stuff that can destroy something that's so beautiful. So then now it's like, okay, well, guess what, Anthony? Like, you got to step your ass up. Like, you got to grow. Like, and again, it's not even economical. Maybe it's, all right, you got to be a better dad. You got to be a better partner for her. You know, You gotta like grow. Maybe it is economical. You gotta impact more people.
Yeah.
You know.
I do.
Because if not, like I said, it starts to get lopsided, and anytime you have lopsided, that's when all those negative. It's like opening a door for negativity.
Sure. What are a couple of the challenges of being with, somebody at that level? I mean, just a couple that you've noticed over the last,
Yeah, I think the biggest one is eliminating your selfishness. Wanting your own time all of the time, wanting the attention all of the time. You got to eliminate your selfishness. You got to be willing to share, right? Time. Those for us are probably, and I think for us, those challenges are even like more magnified because I have an interesting situation. I fly back and forth from Pennsylvania to Arizona every week.
Sure.
Because my kids live in Pennsylvania. We live out here in Paradise Valley. So we see each other at a limited time as it is.
Yep.
So Candy and I always say because like when I'm here, if now it's her that has everything going on, or before when I had a lot of stuff going on, it's like the time away from each other is magnified because it's like we only get 50% of the time to be with each other, So that's a big challenge. And anybody who's going through that has to realize, and again, tie it back to that if you're like the way that I look at it is, the way that I can deal with it is that if I am absolutely truthful in saying that I support her, then I better freaking support her. And I better if you're you hear people a lot of time because it sounds good say like, well, I would want them to be happy. Or I want them, even if it's not right at this moment with me, I want them to be happy. Well, if that's true, then support them, right?
And what does that look like?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and God bless her, she's great. Like she gets it too. Like she's great with it. She's great with like trying to balance the whole thing, and she's like there are a lot of things like behind the scenes that like people don't see. Like and anybody who's ever achieved anything in their life knows this. But like you always see like the success. You don't see the shit you're eating along the way, right? Or the struggles. And I mean, like I said, anybody who's ever done anything knows that, right? So like if I look at myself, if I'm truly going to be I always like think of it as being an asset instead of a liability, right? Now, granted, there are times when it's really easy to want to be a liability because you want to stand up for yourself, or you want what's yours, or you want the credit you deserve, or whatever. All of, like I said, the ego, the narcissistic traits that human beings have. But then you got to check yourself. All right, am I an asset or am I a liability?
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah,
really powerful. What are some ways, what's one way that you keep the fire, like in your particular example, right? Or your particular scenario, you're traveling. She's an entrepreneur, so she's always doing something, right? You're now, you're coming down the entrepreneurial thing now too, by the way, right? You're big on TikTok now. You've got a pretty big social media following, right?
Yep.
You've been featured, in a lot of places.
Yeah.
You're doing big things. So, when you are together and you do have that intimate time physically, like now, okay, what are some things that you both, I guess, try to do to keep that kind of spark, that fire, that actual romantic thing? Is it just spending that quality time, putting the phones down? I mean, what does it look like?
Yeah, I think it's putting the phones down. Recently, with everything that's going on in both of our lives, it's more of literally like sitting at home together. You know what I mean? Like taking a breath. And then another thing too that like we do that like other people in the situation need to remember is like getting back to basics. Like we got together because we have a very like unexplainable like connection. Knowing each other's thoughts and finishing each other's sentences and like always just feeling like that warmth. So if you don't get back to those basics and focus on that, then it's almost like you're almost trying to like artificially like light the fire again, like artificially. where instead it's almost like for us, it's like let's just feel each other, like let's just feel what it's life like to be in our little vacuum, to be in like our home, to chilling on the couch, like ordering DoorDash, like that. For us, that's what we've been doing. Like we went last Saturday, we went to dinner and to a haunted house because I love haunted houses, and she's not a huge fan, but she went anyway. But that was like the first time that we had like actually like went out in like forever. And it's not because we don't make time for each other. It's just that when we had time, we would literally like sit on the couch, or like play Uno, or like, or you know what I mean? Just like chill, like prioritize each other for that moment, because you're always like when you're involved in a lot of stuff like that, you have to prioritize other people's time. You have to, because they're prioritizing yours, right?
It's a tough thing to do.
It is. Yeah, it is, man. And again, it gets back to that like introspection and self-esteem and like knowing like, knowing like the true, the true purpose and the true intention of the other person, and just believing that and feeling that.
Yeah. What got you ready, and what do you think gets people ready? Like when they do end a relationship, or a relationship comes to an end, right? And they have this trauma, they've got the scars, they've got the things that, like they're probably not ready to get right back into it, right?
Yeah.
Day one, like what are some steps that people can take to get back to the point where they could get ready to be in a healthy relationship again? Is it just self-help, personal development? I mean, what does that look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, like some people have like true mental health issues after they go through that, right? And for people like that, it's literally getting the professional help they need, stopping the stigmatization of it, not being embarrassed by it. Like way more people are in therapy than we know, right? So if you're that far gone that you are having issues and like, is it affecting your relationship with the kids or your parents or your job or your friends or like your health, your physical health, right? And if it's to that point, then like get that professional help you need. Like that's number one. And then number two, and I did a lot of that. This stuff was a lot of the personal development stuff. Whatever your beliefs are, like grow. Like when you grow yourself, like. And it helps so many ways. Yeah. It makes you feel stronger, makes you feel healthier. Like it makes you like, and I'm rambling a little bit, but just to physical health is so important for that. Like one of the things when I was going through my separation, the two, like I had this thing, and I teach people this, is basically like to come up with like 3 to 5 promises for yourself and commitments for yourself. No one else. Just your commitments. And mine were try to read 1 book a week, okay? I was real big into self-help books. Like I read a lot of, like Napoleon Hill has a few books that I read. I read some Brendon Burchard books, Tony Robbins. I read 1 book a week. I didn't drink any alcohol at all, like not 1 sip, right? Not that I was some like raging alcoholic, but I just started to correlate and realize that even if I had 1 or 2 drinks, that the chances of me being more emotionally unstable the next day were more likely. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize that. Mm-hmm. So I clean up from that perspective. Watch what I put in my body as far as food, That was another promise. Another promise was to sweat at least 6 times a week, working out, getting the heart rate going, feeling the adrenaline pumping, feeling like, you do something like that. Like if you do, I do this piece of content where I talk about like either running or going to the gym. I do like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. When you do something like that, there's like like I call it and I didn't come up with this, but it's like a transferred mindset effect, where if you start to gain strength and fulfillment in one area of your life, well, then like you can transfer it to the other area of your life. So if you're starting to see accomplishments in like running marathons, well, then you are starting to develop the strength and the belief in yourself to transfer that to your separation or to your future relationship, right? So, because the way that I like started to think about that was I realized that when you're in a divorce or custody battle or both, you are like so like downtrodden and like emotional and angry and sad, depressed and stressed and everything else. Well, that transfers into other areas of your life. So like if you're in if you're already remarried and you're in a custody battle, like that stress and anxiety and everything's going to trickle into your relationship, your work, like your downtime. So like the cool part about it is the inverse is true, that if you find something that can build positive qualities, then you can transfer it into the other areas.
Yep.
So back to your question about what can you do? It's like, yeah, get that professional help you need if you need it, but then start to work on yourself and realize that as you strengthen and grow as a human being, not only will a new relationship be easier, but the quality of person that you're going to attract is better. Right?
Of course.
Because you become a better person and a stronger person, you know?
I read one time, or I listened, or somebody said that when you're looking for a relationship, list out, take a pen and a paper and list out all the things that you're looking for in that person, right?
Yeah.
And then think to yourself, what would that person be looking for in a relationship? And then write all of that out.
Yeah.
And that's who you have to become.
Yep.
Before you're worthy of that relationship.
100%. Yeah, I think that was Joe Dispenza.
It might have been. I don't know.
I think it's
Very well
basically like whatever you like. The way this is the way that I think about it. And again, this wasn't originally my thought. I think it was Joe Dispenza or somebody like that. But whatever you are looking for, be it. You know what I mean? If you're looking for someone who is like mature and healed and whatever it is, successful, strong, healthy,
you got to become
be it. And then you start to attract those sorts of people. Yep. Right?
You almost don't even have to, I mean, to a degree, you almost really don't have to go hunt these people down. I mean, when you become that, right?
Yes.
These people, the way that, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever, I mean, they're quite literally a lot of times, many times. I mean, you can't just obviously sit on your couch, right? But you wouldn't be doing that anyways if you are those things, right?
Yep.
A lot of times those people will just walk right into your life.
It's crazy how it works. And it's the same, again, the inverse is true. That if you don't clear up your shit and you do still have some toxic traits and you do have some unhealed wounds still, then you're probably going to be bringing on either those sorts of people or people that prey on that.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
That's a powerful thing to not only know, but to realize and implement and understand, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of people probably unknowingly do that on accident, right? They're not fully healed. They didn't fully get better, and they're not fully independent, or whatever the right qualities are, right? They're not that yet. And then all of a sudden, a relationship comes. They think everybody thinks they're ready, and now you've got two people, like you said, either that are both broken, or one person preying on the broken person, which really they're broken too.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Either way, that person's broken.
Exactly right.
You know.
Yep.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, I know we're getting a little long here, so I'll go do a couple more things and then we'll wrap up.
I'm cool. Yep.
What are you saying? So you're always providing value. You got big TikTok and big, Instagram and stuff, and what are like just like maybe one or two of the most common questions that you get asked, by people? And it could be anything. I mean, it could be divorce, how to become successful. I mean, just people have got to be just commenting and just even in the Facebook group and stuff. You said you designed a lot of your programs around people's questions.
Yep.
What are some of those the big ones?
I'll give you a few examples. Like one of the things that I always get a lot with regard to I don't get a lot of like business or success or that sort of stuff, just because that's not my audience.
Sure.
Like sometimes, like when I talk to people like you, I do. But as far as like my people, I get one of the big things I get is basically like, can a judge see through someone? Like, can a judge see through that someone is lying, or that someone is like narcissistic or abusive or whatever? And the way that I always respond to that and explain it to people is that, first off, sure, judges are not only educated, but through experience are usually pretty okay with judging credibility of people. And like it's like a skill. I think I even had that skill like before I was a judge. I think it just aided me when I was on the bench, and in life in general. But so sure, a lot of them are skilled in that regard, but like what you need to understand is that you and your attorney have to paint that picture for them. Like you can't just go in and think like this judge is going to see through them. Like your attorney has to be able to know how to press the right buttons and submit and elicit the right evidence to show the judge. You have to be able to not only put together your own evidence for your lawyer, but also be doing the right things out of court so that you're not like biting on everything they do and then you look like the asshole too. Right. So between you and your attorney, you have to be able to paint that picture and guide the judge. Like you have to basically believe, this is what how I used to think when I would go into the courtroom as a lawyer, is I would go in believing that basically like the judge is almost like this is like their first day on earth. And you have to like explain the whole entire story to them and paint the whole entire picture and, you know, draw in all the depth and everything else, and assume that they know nothing, right? They know the law, but even again, knowing the law, like it's your job to be able to tie the facts in the law together.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a big one. That's a powerful one, right? I mean, you know, there's a lot of people, that probably, I never really thought about it, but they probably go in to the courthouse thinking that, well, you know, if I just tell them a little bit, I mean, if they just can get a glimpse of what I'm dealing with, like they'll side with me. Right. Because obviously I'm right and the other party's wrong. Right. And that might not always be true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about it even in just like, from a conversational perspective, like not even court related, but when you're talking to people, like you assume you're already like our English language and any language can't like convey every thought and experience that you've had. Wow. So you are already believing in a lot of instances that the person that you're talking to already like understands who you are and who your perspective is. Yeah. Right. But in reality, like, you know, they don't.
No,
they don't. Right. So whenever you're trying to, you know, prove a case of over whatever the course of a marriage or more recent, like for custody, you have to believe that that person is literally just like becoming a human being. You're like explaining everything to them as it's like you're teaching them like how to walk.
That's a really powerful piece of advice, I think, to the community that you have and the community of people that look up to you.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Give me like one more example of maybe something that people ask you a lot as a common thing, where a belief that people have maybe that is not true or whatever it might be.
Yeah. A lot of things like doing high conflict divorce and custody cases, which is what I consult in mainly. The narcissistic word always comes into play, right? Because everybody believes that their ex is a narcissist, right? And that's fine. Like I a lot of people take offense to that for some reason, and I just try to help people deal with who they're dealing with. So one of the questions that I always get is, you know, how do I bring that up in court? How do I tell the judge that my ex is a narcissist, or how do I show the judge that my ex is a narcissist? And the answer I always give is you don't. You don't bring it up. You don't even bring up that word unless you have an expert that actually diagnoses that person with that word. And then even then, the more important thing is how would that condition, if in fact it is one, and if not, how would their behaviors as being a narcissist, how do they impact the children based on the law? You know what I mean?
I do.
So it's not, they're narcissistic. It's, they've done this historically. They've done this historically. They've done this historically. And guess what? The fact that they've done this and that they're a bad person doesn't mean anywhere near as much as they've done this and it has impacted the children this way. Right?
Yep.
And then, and that will move the meter a lot more in a case than going in and being like, you know, they're a narcissist or they're an asshole or they did this or they did that or they did this. It's okay, like they did this and now our son, you know, misses 1/3 of his days of school. Or they did this and now our son is still.
What's the result of that? Like,
yeah. Right. And that's the biggest thing to do, you know, because for two reasons. Number one, the law is not focused on all of that, like narcissistic stuff. That's number one. And number two, like these judges hear high conflict divorces
all the time.
So like everybody's ex is an asshole. And like, if they weren't, they wouldn't be in court. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to look, you know, number three is they are supposed to be governed by the law. So if you can apply all of it to the law, then that's when you're going to have your most success.
I feel like it's bringing logic into the equation a little bit when a lot of times in these high conflict situations, I feel like from what I'm hearing at least, is that it's mostly driven by emotion a lot of times, and you really have to get yourself to objectively look at the situation and logically say, what is the best course of action here?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I always try to guide people that if they can do it, to step outside and observe it from the outside as a rationalist. That's why attorneys are very good at what they do, is because they're not in the emotion of it.
Sure.
Like if you're going through a divorce, some of the stuff you need to be doing is common sense. It's just that you don't have any sense at the moment because you're going through what I like to call like the perfect storm of emotion, because you just lost a relationship. You just, you know, maybe you're feeling guilt to your church or whatever. You know, you just you feel like a failure. You know, now you know you have your ex in a high conflict situation attacking you and smearing your name and everything else. You lost your kids at least half the time, right? You wonder what they're thinking about you. You wonder what your friends in your community are thinking about you. Like, which side are people going to pick? And then you're in financial struggles because now you're trying to manage two lives financially and pay thousands in attorney's fees. And then you're going through a court process for probably the first time in your life.
Wow.
So it is like it is the perfect storm of emotion to force yourself to think unclearly and to not think clearly.
Yeah, how could you have any common sense in that scenario, right? I mean, it makes sense that, you know, when you're objectively looking at it, that a person wouldn't be able to think logically. I mean, it would be very difficult if you could. I mean,
absolutely.
You could do it, but it would be extremely difficult to do it. And that's probably like when you talk about how when you went through it, and yours wasn't as high conflict, obviously, right? But nonetheless, the process of it was the same, and that's probably why when you went through it, it really opened your eyes to that even more in particular, where you're like, wow, okay, like now I really understand like why they couldn't see it. I mean, you knew it, but then you really knew it, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, mine was like we had a lot of conflict, but we never went to court.
Sure.
We never had to go to court. We never had to like expose the kids to anything like that. But for the people that do, and especially like they've never been there before, like that's destructive. That'll change your life forever if you let it, you know?
Big time. It's
just, are you going to let it change you for the worse or for the better? Like, are you going to be a better person? You know what I mean? Are you going to come out of it being better and stronger and, you know what you want in life and know who you need to be in life? Or are you going to like keep snowballing down the hill like we talked about?
Yeah. You're snowballing one way or the other, right? You're either going uphill or you're going downhill.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I agree with what you say, like 1,000,000%. I mean, I think because at some point you have a decision to make. Hey, I'm going to be the victim or I'm going to be the victor, right? And it's just, at a certain point, it becomes fairly simple. I mean, it might not be easy, but it's fairly simple to make a conscious decision of, okay, how am I going to react and proceed and choose to become, right?
Yeah, and they don't, like, it's all like small steps. Like people we want, especially in today's world with social media and everything at our fingertips, like we want the result immediately. But like it's going to take time and consistency for you to turn into the person you want to be. It's just those little minutia along the way.
Yeah.
Right. I think Tony Robbins says about like we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in a decade.
Yep.
So it's like that, and I think for me at least, it's been so far is the cure is to consistently looking inward and consistently iterating, you know, on the result you're getting. You know, if you're having more arguments with your partner, all right, look inward. What are you doing?
Sure.
And it might not even be, you know, it might not even be what you're saying or how you're treating them. It might be, you know, what's going on in your job. It might be like, what's your relationship like with your mom or dad? What's your relationship with your kids at the moment? It might be, what are you putting in your body? You know, a lot of people don't realize like the impact that like their diet and what they drink and medications and stuff have on them.
Right.
So, yeah, for me, and what I always recommend to people is constant introspection and an iteration, you know, for growth.
I love that. Well, in conclusion, I love the podcast. This has just been incredible. I'm so
Fun.
glad
I love
that
it,
we,
man.
yeah.
I feel like I could talk all day.
I do too. I really do, you know. In conclusion, you have 3 kids, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And
Yep.
they're 12, 15, 18?
Yes.
Okay. So if you were to, for some reason, you know ahead of time that you weren't going to be here any longer, and you, for some reason, could only give your kids, you could sit them down and you could give them one, or maybe write a letter or whatever the case is, you could just really give them one piece of advice. Like
Yep.
you could leave them with one final kind of thing. And that thing is really like how to live their life. It's things that you've learned, things that you've, you know, whatever. Like what would kind of one of the most powerful things be that they could take and implement and live their life better?
I think the biggest thing for them and for all of us is like, be better than you were yesterday. And that begs the question, well, what's better? Well, it's like, what are your goals? What's your goal? You know, if you want to be, if my kids are real into sports, if you want to be the best athlete, be better than you were yesterday. Try harder than you did yesterday, right? If you want to be the best like husband or wife, like be better than you were yesterday. I think that's like, that would be the easiest and the simplest way to put it for them to understand it is, you know, be better than you were yesterday. Try harder than you did yesterday.
You keep doing that for the rest of your life, and you know you'll be a pretty amazing human being.
Compound interest.
Yeah.
Right?
Penny doubled every day for
that's right.
30
days,
right. Like $5 million.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, right.
It's no joke, man. Well, I love that. I really appreciate you being here,
Man.
Anthony. And
Thanks for having me.
I still want to call you Judge Anthony. You know, so where can people find you? You have a really big following on TikTok. You've got a pretty big following on Instagram and other platforms as well. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, on TikTok, I'm at Judge Anthony. On Instagram, I'm at Anthony Bompiani. And on my website's judgeanthony.com.
Awesome.
That's it, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have them reach out to you.
Cool.
Hey, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Drop in the comments section below what you thought. And if you have any questions and anything like that, and maybe one day in the future we'll get Anthony back on the podcast. If you're listening, make sure you leave a 5-star review. And as always, make sure you go reach out to Anthony and tell him how much you appreciate him for just giving so much value to the community. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.